The sound of the helicopter tore through the silence of that hot afternoon like a scream in the middle of the night. Down below, sitting on the wooden step of the porch, Thomas watched the men load his few pieces of furniture into a rusted truck. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from a silent rage that burned inside like an ember left forgotten. He was 72 years old. 50 of those years lived on that land. The helicopter descended slowly, kicking up red dust that stuck to the sweaty skin of the eviction officers. The door opened. A woman stepped out with firm strides, wearing a dark suit that contrasted with the scene of abandonment. She removed her sunglasses and her eyes met Thomas's. He blinked. His heart missed a beat. That face. Those eyes. Impossible. Stop everything now, she said without shouting, but with an authority that made everyone freeze in place. 23 years earlier, Thomas was not a broken man. He was just a widowed farmer who woke before the sun and went to sleep with his back aching. Loneliness weighed on him, but he knew how to deal with it the same way he dealt with the land, by working until he forgot. It was on a winter morning that he found her. The girl was huddled near the farm gate, shivering inside a sweater far too thin for the cold. She couldn't have been more than 12 years old. Her face was dirty, her feet were bare, and she was holding a torn plastic bag with everything she owned in the world. Thomas stopped the tractor. He climbed down slowly. She raised her eyes, frightened like a cornered animal. "Are you okay?" he asked. She didn't answer. She just looked at him with that mix of distrust and desperation that only someone who has known hunger carries. He held out his hand. "Come on. I'll give you some coffee." She hesitated. Then, she accepted. No one in town approved. The neighbors whispered at the market. The pastor preached a sermon about prudence. Even the sheriff showed up to check on the situation. But Thomas didn't care. He saw in that girl what no one else wanted to see, someone who deserved a chance. Her name was Elena. In the first days, she barely spoke. She ate slowly, as if expecting the food to disappear at any moment. She slept dressed, ready to run. But Thomas didn't push. He simply left food on the table, clean blankets on the bed, and went on with his routine. Little by little, she began to help. First she only watched. Then she picked up tools, fed the chickens, watered the garden. She learned fast. Never complained. One day, while they were fixing the fence together, she asked, "Why did you let me stay?" Thomas drove the stake into the ground before answering. "Because everyone deserves a place. And you deserved this one." Elena lowered her head. When she raised it again, tears were streaming down. "One day I'll pay you back for this. When I get rich, I swear I'll pay you back." Thomas smiled, a tired but genuine smile. "You don't owe me anything, girl." But she shook her head with a determination he had never seen before. "I do. And I always pay my debts." 5 years passed. Elena studied at night at the town school and worked during the day on the farm. She was smart. She asked questions. She read everything she could find. Thomas realized she wouldn't stay forever, and that didn't make him sad. On the contrary, he wanted her to fly. When she turned 17, an opportunity appeared. A full scholarship to a university in the capital. She was accepted. Thomas packed her suitcase himself. He slipped money he didn't have into the pocket of her jacket without her seeing. On the day of her departure, she hugged him tightly. "I'll come back," she said. "And when I do, it will be different." He waved until the bus disappeared around the bend in the road. He never heard from her again. The years passed heavily. The farm aged along with Thomas. The crops shrank. The debts grew. Then came the inspections. Forged papers. Invented fines. An eviction order signed by a judge he had never seen. And there he was, on that hot day, watching his life being packed away. Until the helicopter landed. And Elena stepped out of it. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment saying what you thought and which city or country you're watching from. Your participation makes all the difference. Thomas tried to stand up, but his legs wouldn't obey. She walked toward him. Knelt in the dust. Took his old, trembling hands in hers. "I told you I would come back," Elena whispered, her voice breaking. "And I always pay my debts." Elena stood up, still holding Thomas's hand, and turned to the men who had frozen with boxes in their arms. Her gaze swept over each of them like a sharp blade. "Who's in charge here?" she asked. A fat man in a sweat-soaked shirt, clipboard in hand, stepped forward. He had that crooked smile of someone who had always gotten away with everything. "I'm Officer Marcus Delaney. And who do you think you are to interrupt a legal eviction?" Elena took a card from her pocket and held it out. "Elena Vargas, corporate attorney. And there's nothing legal about this eviction." Delaney grabbed the card, looked at it with disdain, and tossed it to the ground. "I don't care how many degrees you have, little miss. I've got a signed court order. This old man owes unpaid taxes, violated sanitary codes, and the property goes to auction today at 5 o'clock. Thomas closed his eyes. Those words were lies, but he had no strength left to fight. He had already tried. He looked for lawyers who charged more than he earned in a year. He knocked on city hall doors and was treated like a beggar. He sent letters that were never answered. Elena, however, didn't look away. "Show me the documents." Delaney laughed. "You don't have jurisdiction here." "Show the documents." Something in her tone made the smile vanish from the man's face. He opened the folder reluctantly and handed over a pile of crumpled papers. Elena flipped through them quickly, her eyes racing over the lines at a speed that made it clear this was no bluff. "Interesting," she murmured. "The sanitary inspection is signed by an inspector who was fired 3 years ago. The tax debt refers to a lot that doesn't even exist on this property. And the court order was issued by a judge who, curiously, is a partner in a real estate company." Delaney turned pale. Those are administrative errors. It happens." "Errors," Elena repeated, with an icy smile. "How many properties have you stolen with these errors?" Thomas looked at her as if he were watching a ghost come to life. She was no longer the frightened girl he had taken in. She was a woman who knew the rules of the game and knew how to play it better than anyone. Delaney stuffed the papers back with trembling hands. "Look, miss, you may have studied law in the big city, but things work differently around here. This man can't pay. He has no family. He has no one. It's better for him to leave with dignity." "He has someone," Elena said quietly, but firmly. "He has me." The silence that fell was broken by the sound of a car arriving. A black BMW pulled up beside the helicopter. A man in a gray suit stepped out, the kind of person who looked important just by the way he walked. He greeted Delaney with a nod and completely ignored Elena. "Trouble, Marcus?" he asked, adjusting his shirt cuffs. "Nothing I can't handle, Mr. Grayson." Grayson. Thomas felt his stomach twist. He knew that name. Everyone did. Richard Grayson owned half the surrounding land, controlled the municipal council, and decided who prospered and who fell in the region. He was the kind of man who didn't dirty his hands, but let others do the dirty work. And now Thomas understood. This wasn't just an eviction. It was a calculated theft. Grayson finally noticed Elena. He looked her up and down with that contempt powerful men have for those they don't consider worthy of attention. "And who are you?" "The person who's going to sue you until your last property turns to dust," Elena replied without blinking. Grayson let out a short laugh. "Bold girl. But you don't know who you're talking to." "I know exactly who I'm talking to. Richard Grayson. Heir to lands acquired through fraudulent contracts in the 80s. Currently under federal investigation for money laundering. 3 labor lawsuits pending. 2 divorces. And an out-of-court agreement with the prosecutor's office that expires in 6 months." Grayson's face hardened. "Who the hell are you?" Elena stepped forward. "I'm the girl you watched grow up on this farm. The same one your security guards kicked out of the fair twice for being too dirty. The one you called trash when I asked for a job at your company at 15. Grayson blinked, confused. Then memory hit. His eyes widened. "You, the orphan?" "Former orphan," Elena corrected. "Now senior partner at one of the largest corporate law firms in the country. And I've come to take back what's mine." Thomas felt something break inside his chest, but it wasn't pain. It was something like hope, a feeling he had forgotten what it felt like. Grayson regained his composure. "You may have money now, but this is already decided. The auction happens in 2 hours. There's nothing you can do." Elena smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. I have a federal injunction suspending any transfer of property until a full audit is completed. I have documents proving this land was paid for 30 years ago. And I have 3 witnesses willing to confirm that you forged debts to force evictions. She turned to Delaney. Including you. Delaney swallowed hard. Grayson clenched his fists. You're bluffing. Test it and find out, Elena challenged. For a moment, no one moved. The wind swayed the trees. The chickens scratched near the barn. And Thomas, sitting on that step, realized that for the first time in years, he wasn't alone. Elena had come back. And she hadn't come just to pay a debt. She had come to settle accounts. Grayson stepped back, but his expression turned into something dangerous. He was not a man who accepted defeat, especially not in public, in front of his own henchmen. You may have your papers and your threats, he said, his voice low and venomous. But I have something better. I have this entire town in my pocket. The mayor, the sheriff, the merchants. No one will testify against me. And that old man there, he pointed at Thomas with disdain, won't last much longer anyway. It's only a matter of time. Elena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pulled her phone from her pocket and typed something quickly. Seconds later, 3 black cars drove up the dirt road of the farm. Grayson frowned. What did you do? I learned one thing during all these years away from here, Elena said, putting the phone away. I learned that power doesn't come from how much money you have. It comes from how much you're willing to do for what's right. The car doors opened. 4 men in suits stepped out, a woman carrying a leather briefcase, and 2 agents with federal badges on their chests. Elena turned to Thomas. Do you remember when I left here? She asked softly. I promised I would come back different. But I didn't work only for myself. I worked for you. For this land. For everything you taught me. Thomas wanted to speak, but the words got lost in his tight throat. Elena went on. When I got to the university, I didn't know anyone. I slept 3 hours a night studying. I worked overnight cleaning offices to pay for what the scholarship didn't cover. There were days I ate nothing but bread. There were nights I thought about giving up. She looked at the farm, at the simple house, at the land that had taken her in when the world rejected her. But then I remembered you fixing the roof alone under the rain. You sharing the last piece of bread with me at breakfast. You never complaining, never giving up. And I realized I had no right to be weaker than the man who saved me. One of the federal agents stepped forward. Ms. Vargas, we brought what you asked for. She thanked him with a nod and turned to Grayson. 3 months ago, I found out by chance that the farm was in the process of being evicted. I saw the name of the person responsible and everything made sense. So I didn't come here by surprise. I came prepared. The woman with the briefcase opened it and handed documents to Elena, who began to read aloud. Full audit of all real estate transactions involving Richard Grayson over the last 10 years. 17 properties acquired through fraudulent evictions. 23 families illegally displaced. Forged documents in partnership with the Municipal Registry Office. Bribery of inspectors and court officers. Each word fell like a sledgehammer. Delaney tried to slip away quietly, but one of the agents blocked his path. Oh, Marcus, Elena said without looking at him. You're here too. Signed confession acknowledging participation in at least 9 forged eviction schemes. In exchange for a reduced sentence, you agreed to fully cooperate with the federal investigation. Delaney lowered his head, defeated. Grayson was red, veins bulging in his neck. This won't lead to anything. I have the best lawyers in the state. Had, Elena corrected. Your firm terminated the contract yesterday when the accusations leaked to the press. By the way, she glanced at her watch, in about 10 minutes, all the major newspapers will publish the full story. With photos, documents, names. It was like watching an empire collapse in real time. Grayson opened and closed his mouth, searching for words that wouldn't come. Elena took another step toward him. Do you know what else I learned? I learned that revenge doesn't bring peace. But justice brings something better. It brings balance. She turned to the agents. You may take him. You can't do this. Grayson shouted as he was handcuffed. I'll destroy you.
I'll.
You won't do anything, Elena interrupted, her voice calm like still water. Because you no longer have power here. You never truly did. Only fear. And fear ends when someone decides not to have it anymore. As Grayson was taken to one of the cars, Elena knelt down beside Thomas again. The old man finally managed to speak. How did you manage all this? She smiled, and for the first time since she arrived, she looked like the girl he had known. You taught me to work hard. You taught me that kindness is not weakness. You taught me that some promises are worth a lifetime. Thomas held her hand, and the tears he had held back for so long finally fell. You didn't have to come back. I did, she said, squeezing his hand back. Because you gave me something no one had ever given me. You gave me a home. And now I'm going to make sure you never lose yours. The woman with the briefcase approached with more documents. Everything is ready, Ms. Vargas. The property is completely regularized. Taxes paid. Clean deed. And we have established a fund for maintenance and renovations. Elena nodded and looked at Thomas. The farm is yours. Forever. No one will ever take this from you. Thomas couldn't answer. He simply pulled Elena into a tight embrace as the afternoon sun painted everything gold. The men who had been carrying the furniture began to return it inside the house, this time with care and respect. And for the first time in years, Thomas felt that the weight he had been carrying on his shoulders had finally disappeared. He was home. And he was no longer alone. Night fell over the farm like a heavy blanket, but this time it brought peace instead of fear. Thomas and Elena were sitting on the porch in silence, watching the stars that seemed brighter than he remembered. There's something I need to tell you, Elena finally said, breaking the silence. Her voice carried a different weight now, something Thomas couldn't quite identify. He looked at her. Go ahead. Elena took a deep breath. When I left here on that bus, I was certain I'd come back in a year, at most 2. I'd get a job, save some money, and help you with the farm. That was the plan. Thomas nodded slowly, waiting. But life didn't work out that way, she continued. University was harder than I imagined. Not just the classes, but everything. I was the poor girl among people who had never been hungry, who had never had to choose between eating or buying a notebook. She paused, her eyes fixed on the dark horizon. In my second year, I got sick. Pneumonia. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. I missed classes, lost my cleaning job, almost lost my scholarship. And when I got out, I owed so much that I thought about quitting everything and coming back. Thomas felt his chest tighten. Why didn't you come back? Elena smiled sadly. Because I remembered what you said when I left. You said, don't come back for me. Come back when you've conquered the world. And I thought, he believes in me more than I believe in myself. How can I give up? She wiped away a tear that slipped down. But there was a moment when I almost truly broke. It was in my 3rd year. I was working 3 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, and still barely managing to pay the rent. One night, I collapsed on the floor of my tiny room and cried until I had no tears left. Thomas reached out and touched her shoulder, a simple gesture that said everything. And that's when I realized something, Elena continued. I realized I wasn't doing it just for myself. I was doing it for you. For the mornings you woke before the sun to work the land. For the nights you went to sleep hungry so I could eat. For every time you defended me when people spoke badly. She turned to him, her eyes shining in the dim porch light. You never asked me for anything. Never demanded. Never made me feel like I owed you. But I did owe you. Not money. I owed you everything. Thomas shook his head. You didn't owe anything, girl. I did what any decent person would do. No, Elena said firmly. You did what almost no one would do. And that changed my entire life. She stood up and went inside the house. Thomas was confused until she returned carrying a wooden box. She placed it on his lap and sat beside him. Open it, she asked. Thomas opened the box slowly. Inside were photos. Many photos. He recognized some, Elena as a child on the farm, himself fixing the roof, the garden they cultivated together. But there were others he had never seen. Elena at her university graduation, alone, holding her diploma. Elena in front of a huge building with a law firm sign. Elena receiving an award. Elena buying her first apartment. In every one of these photos, she explained, I was thinking about you. Thinking about the day I'd come back and show you that I made it. That your kindness wasn't wasted. Thomas held a photo of her on graduation day. She was smiling, but there was something in her eyes that revealed loneliness. You should have called me, he said, his voice breaking. I would have gone. I know, Elena replied. But I needed to do it alone first. I needed to prove to myself that I could do it. And when I finally did, when I became a partner at the firm, when I won my first big case, the first thing I did was start investigating what was happening here. She pulled another paper from the box. It was a deed. Thomas recognized the document, but something was different. I didn't just save the farm, Elena said softly. I bought all the surrounding land. 300 hectares that belonged to Grayson. And do you know what I'm going to do with them? Thomas looked at her, not understanding. I'm going to turn it into a shelter, she explained. A place for children like me. Children who have nowhere to go. Who need a chance. And you, she held his hand, you're going to help me take care of them. If you want. The impact of those words hit Thomas like a wave. It wasn't just about saving the farm. It wasn't just about paying a debt. It was about multiplying kindness. About turning an act of compassion into a legacy. He tried to speak, but couldn't finish. Elena hugged him, and Thomas felt decades of loneliness dissolve in that moment. He hadn't just gotten his home back. He had gained a purpose. A family. A future. Thank you, he whispered. For coming back. Thank you for never really letting me go, she replied. And there, on that old porch of a farm that was almost stolen, two people the world tried to break found something no one could take away: hope. The real twist wasn't Elena coming back rich. It was her coming back human. 6 months later, the farm had changed completely, but in a way Thomas had never imagined. The old house had been carefully renovated, preserving its essence while gaining new life. The barn now housed a library with books donated from all over the country. The garden had tripled in size, and small hands helped water the plants every morning. Thomas was on the porch, watching 8 children play in the yard. Each of them had arrived with the same expression Elena had 20 years earlier: frightened, distrustful, wounded by life. And each of them was, little by little, rediscovering what it meant to smile. Mr. Thomas, a curly-haired girl shouted, running toward him. The tomato plant has fruits. Come see. He stood up slowly, his legs still protesting with age, but his heart lighter than it had been in decades. He walked to the garden with the girl, who wouldn't stop talking about how she had taken care of the plant every day. As he examined the red, shiny tomatoes, he felt a presence beside him. Elena had arrived from the city by car, still wearing her work suit, but with that tired smile of someone who had had a productive day. How were things here? She asked. Perfect, Thomas replied. Lucas learned how to fix the fence. Marina is reading her 3rd book this week. And little Sophia here discovered she has a talent for gardening. Sophia smiled proudly and ran off to show the tomatoes to the other children. Elena and Thomas stood there, side by side, watching the scene that seemed straight out of a dream. Do you regret it? She asked suddenly. Taking me in that day? Thomas looked at her, surprised. Why would I regret it? Because your life was simpler before. Quieter. Less complicated. He shook his head slowly. Simple doesn't mean better, girl. And silence is sometimes just another name for loneliness. Elena bit her lip, holding back emotion. I spent years thinking I needed to pay you back. That I needed to return everything you gave me. But now I realize that's impossible. Thomas frowned. Why? Because you didn't give me things, she explained. You gave me hope. You gave me dignity. You showed me I was worth something when the whole world said I was worth nothing. How do you put a price on that? He thought for a moment before answering. You don't. You pass it on. Elena looked at the children playing, at the farm that was now a home for those who had no home, and finally understood what Thomas had always known. Kindness is not a transaction. It's a cycle. Do you know what happened to Grayson? She said, changing the subject. He was sentenced to 12 years. All the families he evicted are being compensated. and the entire city is under federal audit. Thomas nodded. Delayed justice is still justice. But it didn't bring the satisfaction I expected, Elena admitted. When I saw him handcuffed, being taken away, I didn't feel victory. I only felt pity. Because you're better than him, Thomas said simply. He used power to destroy. You're using it to build. At that moment, an unfamiliar car drove up the road. A woman stepped out, holding the hand of a boy about 7 years old. She looked nervous, glancing around uncertainly. Elena approached. "Can I help you?" The woman swallowed hard. I heard about this place. That you help children. My son. I can't take care of him alone anymore. I lost my job, we're living in the car, and I just want him to have a chance." The boy hid behind his mother, exactly the way Elena had done with Thomas decades earlier. Elena knelt down to his height. "What's your name?" "Miguel," he whispered. "Miguel, do you like animals?" He nodded shyly. "Then you're going to love it here. We have chickens, a dog named Rex, and even a stubborn goat called Marta." She smiled. "And you know the best part? You don't have to be afraid. This is a safe place." The mother began to cry, not from sadness, but from relief. Elena stood up and touched her shoulder. "He'll be fine. And you will too. We're going to help you get back on your feet. You're not alone." As she led Miguel to meet the other children, Elena looked back and saw Thomas watching everything from the porch. He waved, and in that simple gesture there was everything that needed to be said. She had learned well. That night, after all the children were asleep, Elena and Thomas sat on the porch once more. The sky was full of stars. "You saved my life," Elena said softly. "And you saved mine," Thomas replied. There was nothing more to say. Sometimes the most important words are the ones that remain in silence, in the space between people who understand each other without needing to speak. The farm that was almost stolen was now a beacon. The girl who was almost forgotten was now changing lives. And the man who almost died alone was now surrounded by love. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and tell us in the comments which city or country you're watching from. Your participation transforms lives, just as small gestures can transform stories. Because in the end, it doesn't matter how much money you have or how much power you accumulate. What matters is how many lives you touch. And some promises are worth more than